Welcome everyone to our Feeding the 5,000 Emergency Response to Hunger Related to COVID-19 webinar. You can see the contact information for the three organizations that have come together in partnership. And I want to lift up also the North Carolina Council of Churches Partners in Health and Wholeness program that we work closely with as well, as we work to build this new coalition that's going to extend to hopefully every partner working on food, faith, and hunger relief across the state. So Sarah, if you want to stop sharing your screen, I will come on here and say hello to everybody. Great. So my name is Susanna Tuttle, and I am the director of North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light, the Creation Care program of the North Carolina Council of Churches. NCIPL is grateful to be able to host today's Feeding the 5,000 Emergency Response webinar, along with our partners, RAFI, the Rural Advancement Foundation International, and CFSA, the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. NCIPL's Sacred Foodscapes, Making the Food, Faith, Climate Change Connection program highlights the way congregations can minimize our carbon footprints, support just, local, and sustainable agriculture, and improve food security, all as part of answering the mandate to care for creation and the least among us. We all know there is nothing more basic to life than food. We literally are what we eat. The story of our food, how it is grown, by whom, where, under what circumstances, how it travels from farm to fork, and the transformation it undergoes has profound implications for our health, our spirits, and our environment. And we have come together today in the recognition that people that need food most are having trouble accessing it. And our beloved farmers that are growing the food that sustain and nourish our communities are having difficulties distributing it. And there's a whole new way that we can think about our food systems, regenerative agriculture, and building communities through this sacred act of food and our connection from faith to food to farmers and ultimately to a sustainable climate. So I'm going to hand it over to Nick Wood from CFSA and give him an opportunity to frame the crisis from the perspective of CFSA and what the solutions can be in this moment of time. So I'm handing it over to you, Nick, and I will unmute you. There you go.
All right, thank you, Susanna, and thanks to so many of you for joining us on this Friday afternoon. It was really incredible to see the number of organizations and institutions and people of conscience who are gathering to stand in the gap on this crisis in a way where we are leading the way as people in the community to feed ourselves, to take care of ourselves, to support each other during this incredible crisis amongst many that we are already facing. I think that we were already facing the climate crisis, as we know, of which agriculture and agribusiness and the ways that things often happen now contribute to climate change. But organic and sustainable and regenerative practices in agriculture that we're fully capable of can not only reduce that footprint, but even make a positive difference through improved soil health and practices that can literally save the world, because the environment and the land and the water and the sea and us together, we aren't separate. We're part of that world, and our survival is tied up within it. And so amidst this crisis, as we face something and some uncertainty that I think many of us have never dealt with before, we're seeing the holes in these systems. We're seeing the gaps that need to be filled. We're seeing hungry school children and school districts across the state potentially running out of money. We're seeing trillions of dollars in aid that even the $10 billion, this relatively small amount that was set aside for small farmers who are growing our fruits, our vegetables, our meat, the sustenance that helps us survive, we haven't got word one about how this is going to be used. How are we going to support our farmers who are among the most vulnerable? How are we supporting our children and all the folks who are part of our world, how can we do this without that leadership? And I think us coming together and finding a way and showing them and bringing them along is a good first step, because that road is there, and we've got to walk it and bring it along, because what's happening out of Washington and out of Raleigh isn't enough for what we need. We have a moral imperative. I know I've witnessed for 20 years or more doing this work, the power of the faith community to move mountains and change things and show a different way, to combine those resources in that community in a way that can show a path forward. And we have that opportunity today. And you're going to hear from Jared Cates, who I'm privileged to work with at the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, which is an incredible organization that I started a month before that this went down. But we have that opportunity to show and live the moral imperative that we have to feed our youth, to feed workers who have been laid off. We know that the service industry and the restaurant industry has been decimated, and we know that there are crops in the ground ready to feed people. And so Jared has come up with, you've got to come up with an idea, a vision, a project that you can look at and say, we're going to do this here, and it's going to shine a light and show other ways. And so we really appreciate, we're on our way to feeding the 5,000 and making it happen and showing that way. And with your help and with these communities and everyone you know in these networks, we can make that transformation, and we can come out of this stronger in a way that healthy local food stays in our state and feeds our people. And we can show through our example now how to be more resilient going forward and truly transform where we go as a people from here, because there's never been such a time where these choices need to be made and these changes need to be made. So thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Jared to tell you about this incredible work that's starting, and that the work of folks here today as we go forward into Earth Day and into more uncertainty, that y'all are going to help make this happen. We are going to feed the 5,000, and that's going to lead beyond that. And that's why we're here today. So thank you, everybody.
Great. Thanks, Nick, so much for that intro. And yeah, I mean, we were very excited about Nick starting at CFSA, and he was already proving himself a valuable asset in the first month. And then, boy, oh boy, no one was expecting this to happen. So we're very thankful to have Nick in his role as policy director at the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association. I've worked at CFSA since 2012. I actually was interning at CFSA as I was finishing up my master's in social work at UNC Chapel Hill. So I come from a social work background, and I work as a community mobilizer at CFSA, and have had the opportunity to work with our grassroots network of growers and restaurant folks and backyard gardeners and cooperative extension agents and folks passionate about the local food system for the past 8 years. And I feel honored to be a part of that network. And I also work with a large network of food council members across North Carolina, which some of you may be connected with. There's about 35 food councils in North Carolina that are trying to work to create connections in their communities around food. So very happy to have Nick at CFSA, very happy to be on here talking with you all about this project that we are trying to launch off the ground and bring together as many partners together to collaborate as possible, because we cannot do this by ourselves. This has to be a group effort. Figuring out how to get through this emergency crisis needs to be a group effort, and figuring out how to change our food systems to be more equitable for people, planet, and everyone in between. It's going to take lots of collaboration. So thank you all for being here. So several weeks ago, I'm on our policy team with Nick, and so several weeks ago, as this crisis was hitting and farmers markets were closing down and counties were telling farmers markets to shut down, and the governor told the restaurants to close down, we were in major crisis mode. We were in a place where we had never been before. No one knew what was coming the next day. We're still in that place. It's a little bit less, day to day as it was then, but it was a very scary time. And I grew up, before I got into working in community-based nonprofits. I worked for 15 years in the restaurant industry. My father has been a chef for my entire life. He's just retiring this year. So I know that industry. I've worked in the industry. That industry is my family. So as this was, kind of everything falling apart, it was a very worrying situation for all of us, and thinking about farmers too, like also thinking about these service industry folks who are so passionate and are buying from small and mid-sized producers all across North Carolina. There's many chefs and restaurateurs across our state and brewers who, you know, really make this that food industry possible. They have allowed for farmers markets to flourish and for small and mid-sized producers to have markets for unique products and be able to bring those to consumers in unique ways. So I was out in my garden, just like I was doing garden therapy. I mean, it was after hours. I think I worked a 10-hour day being on Zoom and phone calls, and I was outside shoveling dirt to try and get my own garden going for myself this spring. And I just thought to myself, you know, like, what can we do? How can we help vulnerable people who cannot eat right now, who are out of work? And how can we connect these farmers, you know, with a way for them to provide food? How can emergency feeding efforts not just rely on going to the local box store and buying whatever is cheapest and easiest to feed those folks in need? How can we provide some more dignity to those folks who need food with, you know, fresh, locally produced, very healthy, highly nutritious foods? And so this is kind of where the idea came from, and thinking about, you know, all of our partners in the small and, you know, regional food movement, all of the kind of food hubs and food aggregators that we're working with, all these small farmers that are moving out of, you know, selling at farmers markets and going online and having to buy, you know, boxes and bags up front. Like, how can we put some money in their hands to be able to have them provide food to those that are in need? So this is where this idea came from. And this Feeding the 5,000 concept, you know, thank you so much to the Council of Churches and you all for talking with us early on. I mean, we just got word of funding this past week that we have enough funding to feed 2,500 people, which will be 2,500 out of work restaurant and hospitality employees, with a weekly box of fresh produce and meat, and hopefully some eggs too, that will be delivered to their place of former employment or to a local food hub or pickup place that they can then go get in a safe manner. So we're really trying to, you know, build on these systems that are popping up, build on these food hubs that are doing delivery, and connect them with folks who are in need in our communities. We're working with a number of restaurant partners, a number of food hub and farm partners to pilot this in the Charlotte, Boone, Triangle, and Wilmington areas, with really, you know, a goal of expanding from there and working with the tier 1 counties and other communities that aren't, you know, a kind of urban centers. So we have a number of restaurants we're working with. We're, you know, how that's going to work exactly, we do not know. I have a 3-hour planning meeting after this meeting to do program development. So this is, you know, very early stage. You all really are the first people who are hearing about this in a public way. And so, you know, so we're very excited to be able to pilot and feed 2,500 households for 8 weeks. We would love to expand that to feed 5,000 households over 8 weeks. And you all could help us do that. So that's all I got, and I'm gonna hand it off. So thank you all for listening.
Thanks so much, Jared. And we are just so grateful. This partnership, as we said, came together. I'm trying to find my picture here to go back onto the spotlight. There we go. When we had this opportunity to connect with CFSA in such a rapid response way, and kudos to the North Carolina Conservation Network, connecting back with Nick on a COVID-19 emergency response for the Conservation Network, recognized that we had things we could do right now, right here in North Carolina, in partnership with the faith community and the farming community and RAFI. And so I'm going to hand it over to Sarah Ogletree, NCIPL Program Coordinator now.
Thank you. Thanks, Susanna, for unmuting me. I was nervous there for a minute. I was still on mute and I had no power. But yeah, thanks guys, everyone, for joining. This is just such an exciting initiative. I'm thrilled to know that this is happening and to just be in the company of all of you. It's really exciting stuff. So my role in this conversation is really to highlight why this is an issue for people of faith to be talking about and to be involved in and to be thinking about as an initiative, and how we as people of faith and conscience and morality can help support CFSA in this work. So first, just kind of outlining some of the whys. Why is this work that we should be supporting? First of all, the thing that I'm really, really encouraged about by this initiative is that it is meeting immediate needs in real time. So right now, we know that there are people who've been hit really, really hard in our communities, our friends and family, by the coronavirus pandemic, who don't have access to fresh or healthy food, and who are navigating a super different world. They're out of work. They need support. We need to support them. This initiative does that for 2,500 people, right? That's amazing. The second thing, this initiative is helping the farmers that are meeting that initiative. So not only is it helping people fill their bellies, helping to feed the hungry, helping to address the needs of people who are vulnerable during this time, it's supporting the people who are meeting those needs by producing the products that meet those needs. It's supporting farmers. That's super important as well. We need to support our farmers. We need to support people who are growing food. And the fact that we're able to support people who are growing food for their local communities during a crisis, the more local this solution can be, the better. The more sustainable that is, the more resilient that makes our communities. That's another really wonderful thing about this initiative. Also, we know that our food system right now really needs new life to be breathed into it. This is an unprecedented situation, and we need to think on our feet. We need to think quickly about how we can meet the needs that are being presented. So this initiative that CFSA is putting out there is doing all of those things. It's breathing new life into a system that desperately needs to be reformed, to be able to be creative, to meet needs. It's supporting the farmers who are meeting those needs, and it is supporting the people who are hungry in this moment in real time. That's all super amazing. Another thing that I love about this initiative, and another reason that I'm really excited to be supporting it and to be on this webinar with you, is that people of faith always should be at the heart of systemic change and at the heart of feeding people. No matter what your religious tradition is, right? There are stories after stories of feeding the hungry, of meeting people's immediate needs. And there are lots of stories of how we engage in systemic change. Community building is done around tables. Food is a part of that work, like I said, no matter your religious tradition. But for me, this initiative really sparked kind of thinking back to the Gospels. I was raised in the Christian tradition. I'm a Christian. And I thought about the story of feeding the 5,000 in the Gospels in our biblical text. So, in this story, if you're not familiar, Jesus is teaching and preaching to a crowd of many, many people, right? Thousands of people, and it's getting dark, it's getting late, and people are tired and they're getting hangry. And the disciples say, okay, I think we should let everybody leave now, Jesus, and they need to go and buy food for themselves. They need to go feed themselves. So let them go to the city center and feed themselves. Let's dismiss everyone. And Jesus says, no, you feed them. So Jesus, the disciples, it's not that they were doing a bad thing. They were just thinking within our typical system. They were saying, people take care of themselves. And Jesus said, no, we're going to take care of these folks. We're going to feed them. The food is multiplied and all are fed. We know in this situation, there is more than enough food to go around, right? It's just we have to think outside of our typical system, outside of our typical box, and get the food to the people who need it. We have to think in a different system. That's the work of the Gospels. That's the work of our sacred texts. And that is the opportunity that this initiative is giving us, literally to feed the 5,000, right? Those are the people that Jesus fed in the story. We are also being given an opportunity to feed 5,000 people. As Jared said, CFSA already has funding for 2,500 participants, which is amazing. It's just an incredible starting place, but we as a community can make a difference to ramp that up, right, to 5,000 people, and that's really our call. The other reason that I'm excited about this initiative is because we know that that things like this, situations like pandemic, will continue to happen. Things disrupt our food system. As an organization, I work with North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light. I'm the program coordinator there, and we are an organization that addresses climate change. And we know that climate disruptions, interrupt our food system. They interrupt how we typically do things. So this kind of pilot project not only meets immediate needs, but it also helps lay the groundwork, lay the foundation for meeting needs in our future in a sustainable, equitable, and just way. So I really think we're getting the package deal here. We're doing the work of the gospel. We're loving people well, and we're thinking with a lot of foresight, but also we're addressing immediate needs. So that's my spiel, right, about why this is important. But then what do we do about it? As Jared said, we have funding, CFSA has funding for 2,500 people. That's so, so awesome. But I really do believe that as a faith community, as communities of faith and communities of conscience and morality, spirituality around the state, that we can amp that up. So what I'm asking and what we're asking today is that you help to make this happen by donating to this initiative. There's a link. If Jared or Nick could drop that, I didn't get to copy it into my clipboard and I apologize. But check out the chat box. They're going to drop a link about donation information to this initiative. You can directly support this and be a part of the work of feeding the 5,000 and prophetically imagining a more just system. Also give as you are able. We know that this is a really hard time for a lot of people. So if you are unable to give right now, spreading the word about this, that's wonderful too. You know, you can share this on your Facebook page. This is a Facebook Live. So you can share it on your Facebook page. We'll have a YouTube video that you can share. You can send it out via your church newsletters. You can send it out in your own email. Let people know this is happening, because a pilot project is the beginning. And like Jared said, you know, we're hoping to really broaden this work and do more of this work. So there will continue to be opportunities to give and be a part of what's happening. So make sure that you're tuned in to what's going on. Maybe sign up for some newsletters from CFSA. Sign up for our newsletter from NCIPL, from RAFI's newsletter. We're all in this together. And please help us feed the 5,000 in real time and get ready to feed 5,000 more in the times to come. This is just such an exciting and beautiful opportunity, I think, that we all have to show up for our communities and love them well. So that's my piece. And I'm going to pass it to the next Jared, right? We have our two Jareds, and this is Jared White of RAFI.
Thank you, Sarah. My name is Jared White. I'm a program coordinator with the Come to the Table program at RAFI, and I'm really excited that we are able to partner with CFSA as well as North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light on this project and introducing it to everyone. I really feel like this project has the potential to benefit farmers and growers, food chain workers, and our food system as a whole. As markets, buyers, and sources of income become unreliable or inaccessible, farmers benefit from this project through access to new markets. Because restaurants, catering, and other food retail closures, in addition to diminishing access to wholesale markets, farmers and producers need access to new sources of income in order for farms, especially smaller family-owned farms, to remain viable. So this project offers significant short-term revenue for farmers as they attempt to stabilize their income, apply for grants and loans, assess their financial situations, and attempt to navigate a quickly changing agricultural landscape. Given the low margins involved with farming, often farms have high debt ratios, and farmers are often in unfair and unjust contractual obligations. Providing income for small, independent, and family-owned farms is essential for their continued survival. And with few economic protections or little to no safety net, food chain workers benefit from this project through direct support. The designation of food system workers as essential, in combination with being given minimal health protections, minimal wage protections, rarely sick pay or any job security in the midst of this pandemic, means that food system workers' positions are deemed important enough to continue their functions, but their personhood is not deemed important enough to garner protection. So in providing 2 months of healthy and fresh foods, this pilot project will contribute to the personal health and stability of out-of-work restaurant and hospitality employees in a very tangible way that addresses a tangible need. And creating new relationships, new connections, and logistical networks can help our varying local food systems develop resilience and flexibility in the face of uncertain challenges and changing circumstances. So leveraging restaurants and food retailers as both sources of relationship and connecting farmer cooperatives with those who have lost their jobs, and as a physical hub for food pickup, this will help create new opportunities for collaboration and mutually beneficial relationship. As some farmers dispose of or destroy unpurchased food on the one hand, while demand at food pantries has increased on the other, we can see that our response to the current crisis must address connections and relationships just as much as it does supply and production. So creating new relationships will help those in the food system expand our agricultural imagination through exploring new ways in which farmers can continue to provide food for those who need it the most, while being economically sustainable in the process. So it's essential that churches and faith communities continue to support farmers during this time. And I really believe that this pilot opens doors to doing that in a faithful way, right? This pilot project will provide meals for out-of-work food service employees through purchasing through local farms and connecting with local restaurants. And this will address the tangible needs of farmers for economic stability, as well as for food industry workers for food, each through a model of reliance upon personal relationships. And this project is one of several local and statewide efforts that churches and faith communities can engage with to support farmers and increase food access for those who frequently experience food insecurity. For example, farmers of color in the US endure lots of systemic racism within the food system that causes economic and political harm that's only being exacerbated by the current pandemic crisis. Farmers of color have less access to markets, less representation within governmental and nonprofit agricultural organizations, and often less access to financial resources and opportunities, which often results in higher debt rates, lower agricultural land ownership rates, and fewer profitable farms. And especially in the wake of the pandemic, these factors compound to decrease profitability for farmers of color and food access for faith communities of color. So for example, the Come to the Table program at RAFI has created our Farm to Church project as a longer-term approach to connecting farmers of color with local congregations, many of which are situated in food deserts or have a high percentage of congregants who have low access to fresh and healthy foods through small-scale CSA partnerships. So that's just one example. Individuals and organizations throughout the state and the region are organizing to support farmers, farm workers, food service workers, and food retailers. As the social epicenter of many communities, especially rural ones, churches have an integral part and a role to play in supporting the people who produce our food, transport our food, and serve our food. And so I hope that each of us will do what we can to play a part in supporting our farmers as well as our farm workers and food system workers. And I will hand it off to Susanna.
Thank you so much, Jared. I really appreciate that. And as all of you can see, and there's so much good connection happening in the chat box, we are making connections that we need to be making. And this Feeding the 5,000 program is an immediate campaign, thanks to CFSA. And we're really calling upon, as Sarah said, the faith community to match what CFSA has been able to raise in a very short amount of time. And then we can build this as a foundation. So I want to move into the question question and answer part. I'm putting Jared from CFSA back on the screen right now because we had a great question come in from Mary Alice from CTNC, the Conservation Trust of North Carolina. Hi, Mary Alice. And she would love to hear from CFSA and others about what we believe are the barriers to expanding the program into the Tier 1 non-urban counties. Besides funding, what do we need right now to keep putting the program on the ground in more communities? Thanks for that question. And Jared, I think, there you go. I'll unmute you if that works.
Great.
There you go.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great question. I love going back-to-back Jareds. It looks like never gets to happen for me. So tag team with Jared, I love it. So, this kind of speaks to the inherent complexities of the food system itself. And in these local and regionalized food systems, you've had a number of food hubs pop up as regional aggregators to serve basically the restaurant markets in more urbanized areas. So you have Fresh List in Charlotte is doing that. You have Catawba Fresh over the border in Rock Hill serving the Charlotte metro community. You have Farmer Food Share serving the urban Durham community. You have the Produce Box kind of serving deliveries to individual households throughout Charlotte, the Triangle, and Wilmington. You have Feast Down East, which is a small food hub and aggregator in the Wilmington area. And then you have the High Country Food Hub, which is a small regional aggregator up in Boone. And so, it's where these folks have, they've popped up to serve a market, and that market is mostly restaurants and small retail stores buying from small and mid-sized farmers. And, one of the wicked problems of the food system is, distribution and aggregation and cold storage. And that's been a major challenge, as a lot of our small food infrastructure has disappeared over the past 30 years. So it really is kind of like an infrastructure challenge, like getting off the ground. Those folks have relationship with restaurants. They have relationship with restaurants that purchase local, and they have relationship with local farmers. And so to kind of get the pilot up and running, it's a natural kind of easy place to go that is kind of serving the restaurants that have been purchasing local for years and making that commitment, and we're trying to kind of pay it back and support all the workers in that industry. And I think, but there are other folks like Warren Food Works up in Warren County. They've been chopping produce and selling it into school systems around North Carolina. They've been doing innovative ways to access more urban markets, and they're kind of like a food hub in Warrenton. They have restaurant folks in Warren County who may or may not be purchasing locally. Maybe they purchase from local farmers in the future if they knew they were there, but they certainly have food and hospitality folks who are struggling right now. So, we'd love to partner with Warren County. So I think the question, the kind of getting it off the ground quickly in an emergency response, for us, having those relationships is kind of like, why, but we want to put in that time now to build that out, connect with other folks who can do that kind of distribution in Tier 1 counties, and connect with them. And that's another thing that we have to be careful about. Like, we're not getting into the food distribution business. Like this grant funding won't pay for us to do that work. We really have to rely on farmers who can, do deliveries, set routes, do that on their own, and we pay them up front to bring that food to those vulnerable folks. But this funding won't pay for that capacity. We don't quite want to get into that work, and we're not food distributors. They know that work, and they're the experts at it. So I know I kind of talked a lot around that. Hopefully that gave you a good answer. Any other questions? I think that is our goal, is to work with those partners as we can.
Yeah, I know. Another question came in. Thank you for that, because I think a lot of us, as we're listening to the national news and hearing about dairy and meat production just being dumped, and this notion that it's not a lack of food, right? It is about getting it to where it needs to go. And just as we're brainstorming in a community, I know when we first started talking about this, we mentioned a little bit about, like, there are a lot of out of work Uber and Lyft drivers right now, for example. Yeah. This initiative and what you're doing as CFSA is not the institution or the organization to step in and start paying Lyft and Uber drivers to.
Well, actually,
food.
Funny you mentioned that. Well,
okay.
so actually, we are talking to Lyft North Carolina. Lyft North Carolina is piloting a food delivery program in Southern California right now. They're also going to be piloting it in the Atlanta metro and Miami metro areas. They're interested, I saw, the issue of transportation is a real thing. There's a lot of farmers who are running their own individual routes, but they're hitting transportation, challenges. They're not trying to interact with new people. They're trying to stay in quarantine. They're not trying to hire new drivers to come onto their farm. So it's a challenge, but we could supplement with Lyft, and that could provide some money for Lyft drivers. There's also taxi services. There's out of work restaurant employees that could be driving. At Lyft North Carolina potentially might want to join in and donate some rides. I don't know. Maybe we can get there. We'll see. But yeah, that's a big question too, is how we can support expanding distribution. And part of this money that is going to pay for these food boxes is going to be going to farmers and food hubs up front, so that will cover the payment, their costs for transportation. So hopefully that will help them to be able to work out on the front end, securing some more transportation in general. And if we can pay Lyft a chunk up front that enables them to run X number of rides, then all the better. So we are thinking about all that as part of this program.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think I'll spotlight myself real quick, just to talk a little bit about some questions that have come in with regards to the role of faith communities. And so I appreciate that. We have a unique relationship to communities to begin with. And one of the reasons that we wanted to launch this conversation in partnership about the immediate call to action to feed the 5,000. So we have this, CFSA has this resource right now that we want to make sure we match. So be sure, I know a lot of people that are still employed and doing good work in the community. There's been a lot of discussion on social media and in the news about ways that people could donate their own stimulus check if they're not in an immediate need for it. So again, we call upon folks and people of faith, communities of faith, to communicate this information of need, and that there is a solution that we can feed people today. So that's our first and foremost purpose of this particular webinar. But as we build this out, all the wonderful people on the call and how we strategize and develop a roundtable. If we can, I know everybody has massive amounts of Earth Day events next week, which is a great way to communicate this information, because we are going to be interacting with lots of folks virtually, and not just to celebrate all the good things that the earth provides, but we as people of faith of what we're called to do in our ministries. And when we're thinking about transportation, of course, there are lots of congregations that have fleets. They do have vehicles, they have access to transportation. And so that's really on us as the North Carolina Council of Churches and RAFI, who are working directly with the congregations to communicate sort of, it's the, what do you have, what do you need? How can you help us identify hungry at the community level? And then how could churches, so many congregational facilities in their parking lots are already hosting farmers markets. So what are the opportunities to not just have the food come through the farmers and then be there in a sale or market setting? We want that to continue, absolutely, but to also have that be a distribution site, pickup site. So there's just a lot of creative ways that we can think about this and what it looks like for the long haul, what this looks like for the future of food distribution forever and ever more. So that's where we're jumping in. And Jared has put his, especially for farmers to contact him, he's put his email here in the chat. And I think what I'd like to do now, we have a little bit of time. I'm just looking back through the chat a little bit more. I love seeing that restaurants are, committed to getting local foods and distributing to the public. That's really fantastic. So we have a little bit of time here, and before I want to go into the gallery view now, so I'm going to cancel my spotlight. And for those of you that might be newer to Zoom, up in your right-hand corner, there's a button that you can push that's if you don't already have it on gallery view. If you do, it'll say speaker view, but if you want to click on the gallery view button, then you'll see us all in here. I'm just looking down. Yeah, a question just came, actually, from Sarah, my colleague and staff, of how do organizations get involved if they want to deliver food to their communities? And so that would be a question, I guess, just big picture, maybe to Jared and to Jared, if either of you want to take that question. What would that look like? What would be the on-ramp for that in imagination, exploration, future vision ideas? Like if we had a whole bunch of congregations that said, we have fleets, we want to transport food, what would that look like?
So, I mean, I don't know. The answer is I don't know right now. We're still figuring all these details out. And so, we're trying, the other, tricky thing is like, it has to be kind of like a restaurant to participate, and we have to kind of have a match near a participating food hub or farmer, so it's all about, that's why we kind of have these specific regions kind of selected as a pilot. So we don't know, but I think as we get this off the ground and as we're understanding what some of those transportation challenges are for this project specifically, we can reach back out and let you know. I'm sure there are all sorts of other opportunities to transport food right now that I do not know about, that Jared might know. I don't know, but I also had a question about how do recipients select for this program, and that's a challenge that we're working through now. And I just kind of want to put that out there, where the idea of this program is now is we're approaching restaurant owners, we're giving them kind of a list of what might be a vulnerable employee in their network, and then we're asking them to identify employees that they have laid off or are vulnerable, and then letting us know a number. We're trying to do it, without as least identifiers as possible, potentially, to protect privacy, to protect, potentially undocumented folks from feeling uncomfortable. So we recognize that that's like not the best system, like relying on restaurant owners to identify vulnerable people. So we're trying to figure that out. We're trying to tweak it. We're trying to make it as equitable as possible. We can't quite use unemployment papers because of privacy concerns. So that's kind of where we're at right now. We haven't figured that all the way out. So I appreciate that question of how are people being selected.
And then just another question that just came in, is there a plan to map what communities will be getting this service, and will the map be updated regularly so that we can keep an eye out for the connecting partners we know involved in the efforts? Oh, you're muted. Sorry, that's on me. There.
I don't know if we'll end up mapping it. We will certainly put up, once this project is launched and piloted, we will certainly be putting up a webpage that talks about participating restaurants and participating farms and food hubs, and we'll be sharing that widely. I don't know about a map specifically though.
That's great. That's a good question. So as we're coming towards, if anyone has any other questions that they want answered by Jared or Sarah or Nick or myself, what we want to be able to do is definitely start this dialogue and figure out how, again, the asset mapping of our state of coming together in this crisis. We've already seen so many initiatives and partnerships being developed just in a rapid response mode, but we know that from a sustainability and long-term resiliency perspective that we need to keep this going. And as we're seeing the stimulus money and the stimulus packets get developed, we definitely don't want this to just be a short-term fix or a bailout for certain industries or parts of our community sectors. This is all about long-term community building that we have and we have been working on for a long time, but this is our opportunity to make it really, really visible and to change people's lives and engage folk that maybe haven't seen an on-ramp or an entry point beforehand. And I, again, specifically call out to all of our congregational network because we know we have resources that are valid and visible and need to be deployed. So, yes, there are questions about educational components for receiving food on healthy eating, cooking, and or civic engagement. Super excited about that. I'll just go back and Jared White, if you want to jump in and say anything about that. We've been discussing conversations about how to do online cooking classes. We know that not everybody necessarily knows what to do with raw produce, and so to take a head of cabbage and to be able to explain the many, many ways that you can use it, which would be really exciting. I'm gonna unmute all my colleagues here. And regarding working with undocumented folks, Kim Fistry is recommending partnering with existing community orgs who do specifically specific outreach and services for the immigrant population, we have some resources that we're going to be putting on our website for the Council of Churches on that as well. We do have an immigration program as part of the North Carolina Council of Churches, and then there's a comment here, yeah, from Jared about the North Carolina Restaurant and Lodging Association is supporting this project as well. So Jared White, did you want to speak to any of those comments or questions?
Sure. Yeah. I think that, yeah, listening to all of those ideas, there's clearly a lot going on in terms of options and directions and ways that congregations can participate and contribute. So I don't know if I can necessarily speak to any of them in particular, other than to say I'm definitely up for figuring out how we can mesh all of those pieces together and make sure that people are taken care of and that communities are able to leverage and use the resources that they have available to them in a way that is faithful and appropriate for the context.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I want to give Nick an opportunity to just kind of repeat our call to action and also the email that folks should be emailing questions about this initiative to. Is that Mary Beth? Who should they be writing to specifically about the Feeding the 5,000 initiative? They're muted.
I'm trying to unmute Nick, but I think I don't know why I can't unmute him.
Oh, I'm unmuted. I don't. I would turn to Jared for the answer of which email address.
Okay.
Well, we put Mary Beth, your education. We put your education coordinator as the contact, so she can probably field those calls or wherever they need to go.
Great.
Yeah, and before we close out, we have one more conversation here from Veronica Butcher, who works with Mothers and Others for Clean Air. We are hearing from our rural medical professionals that access of high-speed internet is a real barrier for streaming content. So will there be downloadable resources for those who can't stream or don't have internet? And I can speak to that. So one of the things that North Carolina Interfaith Power and Light is working on is partnering with rural electric co-ops to deploy broadband hotspots around rural parts of the state. So we're currently excited that Roanoke Electric in the northeastern part of the state has begun that, doing that. We're looking, we have a grant that we're completely shifting over to address this crisis that we're in, and looking at democratizing rural electric co-ops. But first and foremost, in order to communicate with anyone, obviously the internet and high-speed broadband, and not having low wealth communities have to use all of their data plan and cell service just to be able to communicate without having access to Wi-Fi. So again, congregations are a perfect location to have a hotspot be broadcast out. There's a lot of different creativity that's happening there. Having a truck placed in a congregational parking lot so that broadband can be cover a certain area, and we're looking in to partnerships with that as well. And so, you know, even identifying who is hungry, what the needs are, deploying communications, and being able to make sure, again, whether it's a cooking class or you know, just a request for food. We want to make this justice first, equitable, diversified, and inclusive in every way we possibly can. So thank you for that question. And yes, so many good questions and thoughts. I'm just so excited that we've come together in this hour. I know Sarah's gonna give one more call out as far as our call to care for God's creation, which includes all of our neighbors and families across North Carolina. And then Jared White is gonna close us out with prayer.
Sure, yeah, so I'll just make this one more call. You know, please help us to feed the 5,000, to amp up this great work that CFSA is doing. to be present for our neighbors and our friends and our family and our community members who are in need right now, in need of fresh and healthy food, and to support the people who are growing that food, who are making that possible, making this a local response, a local solution, community for community by community. That's the work that we are called to do. It's the work that we care about. So if we can drop that donation link. Yeah, Jared just dropped it again. Thank you. It is in the chat. Please help us do that work. Thank you so much for joining this conversation, and just for the ways that there's so much inspiration also in the chat. You guys are helping to build this, this movement of justice, and that's just beautiful and so good to see. So I've been deeply encouraged during this time by the ways that communities are showing up for each other. And this is just another way that we're doing that, and doing it creatively and prophetically. Thanks again. Please donate as you are able. And Jared White of RAFI is going to close us out with a prayer.
Let's pray. God of abundance, we come to you with our hands outstretched, thirsty for justice and hungry for wholeness. We are desperate for a faithful food system, for the protection of farm workers and farmers, of food service workers and producers. We pray for the growing of compassion, for the endurance of generosity, and for the restoration of our relationship with our food, with our soil, and with our neighbors, seen and unseen.
Yeah.
Please multiply our time, our effort, our energy, and our resources, and increase our empathy, our curiosity, and our humility. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I think everyone else is muted. Thank you. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and stay tuned for more information.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks for with y'all.
Jane.
Enjoyed it. Honestly, I really need to talk to our food guy.
That'd be a good time. Should I call Natalia Venezuela Swanson or yeah?
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Eric, can you come back up the
Fast as possible.
slide?
That's the priority. And they're backed up because of what people are doing.
No, you said exactly, and I had listed two options, so I'm asking which one.
Sarah, can you pop back up the slide to close with? That would be great. In case folks on Facebook want to see the contact information. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.